Hello everyone, today's video, this is going to be something a little bit different. Not a horror movie review, more of a topic discussion. This came to my mind recently. I thought this would be a good idea for a video topic. As a little kid in the late 90s and the early 2000s, Goosebumps was one of the scariest TV shows for a kid's show at that time. This show really scared me and freaked me out when I was a little kid growing up. Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark was the 1990s Twilight Zone anthology TV show for kids. Goosebumps was a 1990s horror kids horror TV show anthology series based on the R.L. Stine books. Like all kids growing up, I had almost all the books, getting them at school from book sales, and some that I got from one of my mom's former co-workers at her old job. I did not have all but a few Goosebumps episodes on VHS tape, but as I got older, I gave those books and VHS tapes away, and I don't own them anymore. Luckily, the show is available on streaming service on Netflix. I'm unsure or aware if I get the whole series on DVD or Blu-ray. As I said before, I want to do something different. Hopefully, this could make you think critical and logic on Goosebumps. James World made a video on why superheroes are classic monsters. Here's my video version of how I see Goosebumps are based on classic horror movies. Some moments of the TV show remind me of classic horror movie moments in some ways. I'm not saying all these facts are 100% true. This is just my opinion, making me think a little bit on where R.L. Stine had his ideas and inspirations. Because as I get older, rewatching the Goosebumps TV show on reruns, I start to think more analytically and realize, coming to my senses thinking, R.L. Stine was inspired from classic horror movies for Goosebumps, but made them PG kids versions. Not saying this is a bad thing. Lots of great artists are inspired from something from classic books, music, or movies of the past. He took the same concepts, but made his own version as a kid's horror version. I'm not going to compare and contrast every episode. That will take me a long time, a lot of thinking, to think what this book or episode was inspired from. Instead, I'll pick the basic ones. There was no particular order, just analyzing. Night of the Living Dead, Welcome to Dead House. Right off the bat, I want to point out, Welcome to Dead House is like Night of the Living Dead. When you compare and see elements to George Romero's Night of the Living Dead, for example, when Josh and Amanda are looking for their missing dog, Petey, they go into a cemetery and fight the dead zombies. Because this is a kid's show, they're not flesh-eating zombies, they are zombies that suck their souls. Like in Night of the Living Dead, the famous opening scene, Barbara and John are visiting their dead mom's grave and come across a zombie. In Welcome to Dead House, Amanda and Josh both get away and survive. Unlike in Living Dead, John is killed by a zombie, Barbara gets away. Also, like in Night of the Living Dead, the main characters are trapped running away from the zombies in their house, not some random house like in Living Dead. After getting rid of a good luck charm, the zombies can enter Josh and Amanda, save their parents from exposing the zombies to sunlight, and they leave Dark Falls. Can't blame them for that. Invasion of the Body Snatchers, stay out of the basement. This episode was like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. When the pods are found, they are copies of their loved ones after falling asleep. They turn to aliens, their trust is lost. They have changed into something else. Instead, Margaret's dad is a botanist who was fired from his job working on an experiment to prove to the university he was wrong, letting him go. He neglects his family, he's focused on his work in the basement. When her father says he's experimenting on plants and turning them into animals, in a way this also reminds me of H.G. Wells' Island of Lost Souls. Besides similarities to Invasion of the Body Snatchers, Margaret's dad is a cliché mad scientist like Dr. Frankenstein, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Dr. Herbert West, and Dr. Moreau. Like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, Margaret suspects there's something different about her father, how he neglects her, doesn't spend time with her, and stopped calling her princess despite that she did not like being called that. The ending to this episode and story is great when Margaret comes face to face between the evil plant monster father and her real father. When Margaret is called princess for the first time in a while, she knows that's her real dad, destroys the fake copy of her dad. Werewolf Fever Swamp, the Wolfman. Okay, comparing this to the Wolfman, this can be compared to any other werewolf movie. In Werewolf Fever Swamp, Grady and his family move into a swamp for the summer because of his parents' work. Grady suspects this hermit he came across thinks he's a werewolf. Grady finds his abandoned dog, and the family think the dog is responsible for killing animals. And Grady does not believe that. Later we find out his neighbor Will was the werewolf the whole time. Like Lawrence Talbot, he does not want to hurt anyone, but has no choice when the full moon rises. Despite comparing this episode to the Universal Monsters, The Wolfman, you'd also compare this to I Was a Teenage Werewolf, and also has some elements to Wes Craven's Swamp Thing, because this episode takes place in a swamp. Also, as a side note, there's an Easter egg of Grady owning a Haunted Mask skateboard. As a little kid watching this episode, I always thought that was pretty cool. The Haunted Mask, Halloween, and Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This is my favorite episode of the series. It was one of the scariest things I ever saw as a kid, about a girl who goes around wearing a mask, scaring people for payback who scare and prank her at school. Two ways I can compare this episode are Halloween and Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Like Michael Myers, he stalks and kills his victims, but in this, Carly Beth stalks and scares people, metaphor for killing. The mask Carly Beth wears was real skin made from someone's face. Pretty gruesome to say for a 90s kids TV show. That's something they might get away with saying today on a kids TV show today when you think about it. Also, this episode takes place on Halloween. It's a Halloween vibe, just like the original Halloween movie. But despite comparing this episode to Halloween, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I recently read that R.L. Stine said he got the idea from when his son's Halloween mask got caught and stuck and could not take it off. Phantom of the Opera, Phantom of the Auditorium. This is Goosebumps' version of Phantom of the Opera. A school teacher drama is producing a stage of Phantom of the Opera. Weird, mysterious things begin happening. This kid Zig, despite he's been kind of a jerk and a prankster, he is being framed for pranks he did not do. It's a great twist at the end, but I won't spoil it. Give it a watch. You'll be very surprised and shocked what the Phantom was. The Invisible Man lets get invisible, and my best friend is invisible. Simple, straight answer. H.G. Wells' Invisible Man. In Let's Get Invisible, it's not a formula that turns them invisible. The kids go inside this empty room in the attic with a mirror. They pull the switch and they turn invisible. The downside of this, the more they keep turning invisible, their alter ego and evil opposite can capture them, and they might never come back from another dimension, and they maybe remain trapped there forever. There was also My Best Friend is Invisible. I've never seen, but I've heard about it. I don't remember reading this book or seeing the episode. Click. Okay, this one I'm not sure if this counts. I doubt if Adam Sandler got inspiration for this episode for Click from 2006. This came out before Click in 2006, a decade later. I saw this episode for the first time this year. It was one of the weakest episodes of the series. Not really much to say about this one. The Blob and the Blob That Ate Everything. I recently did a review of the original 1950s Blob with my dad on my YouTube channel. Link in the description. This episode was obviously inspired from both the original 1958 and 1988 The Blob remake. And this is about a kid who writes horror stories, and anytime he writes a story on the Blob, the story comes to life and it comes true. In a way, you can say it's somewhat of a inspiration for the anime pre-Death Note series. Dracula Vampire Breath. It may not be a Goosebumps Bram Stoker's Dracula, but it's a kid version of vampires. Two kids go sneaking around finding birthday presents their parents hid, only to find out Dracula, spoiler right here, twist, right here, is that Dracula is their grandfather. Happy birthday, kids, you're vampires. You got vampire teeth for your birthday. The Mummy, Don't Wake the Mummy. This episode was inspired from Universal's The Mummy. I saw this as a little kid on cable TV. I don't remember the book or episode that well. Again, not much to say on this one, but this had to have been inspired from Universal Monsters' The Mummy when you think about it. Child's Play, Night of the Living Dummy. This is basically the PG version of Chucky. You could also say this episode was inspired from the Twilight Zone episode, Talking Tina. A little girl gets a ventriloquist dummy after reading a voodoo card. The ventriloquist comes to life. Whenever Amy performs ventriloquist acts in front of her family, no one believes her that Slappy has a mind of his own, and he begins framing her for accidents she did not do. Like ruining her sister's artwork or hurting her best friend's little sister. When no one believes Amy up until the end with a final showdown between Slappy versus Amy and her family. Edgar Allan Poe, Pit and the Pendulum, A Night in Terror Tower. Okay, this one's a little tricky. It's not really based on the Edgar Allan Poe, The Pit and the Pendulum, but it has like similar concept taking place in medieval times, torture chambers. This episode could be looked at today as a PG version of Game of Thrones. No gore, no dragons, and no nudity. It's about two kids, brother and sister. Their parents are on a conference trip in London and go on a Terror Tower tour, end up in an alternate universe where they don't remember who they are, and they really end up back in medieval times, and they are the real prince and princess who were ordered and executed to be killed by their evil uncle. Friday the 13th Camp Nightmare. This is basically Goosebumps' version of Friday the 13th as a PG version. A group of kids disappear one by one. Anytime a camper disappears, they highlight the accident never happened to prevent bad publicity, and that there was no kid by that name. Like in Friday the 13th movies, you have a few characters that are cliche asshole morons, but again, the PG version, the difference is no sex, no skinny dipping, no smoking weed, no drugs, and no drinking. It's a surprise twist I did not see coming about the truth, but I won't spoil it. Give it a watch. One Day at Horrorland, any horror amusement park horror movie. This makes me think not one, but two or more different horror amusement parks, or any like carnival movies, like The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, Toby Hooper's Funhouse, Carnival of Lost Souls, Freaks, and Murders in the Rue Morgue. This was another one of my favorite episodes of the series. It also got me interested and fascinated reading about creepy abandoned amusement park rides. It also makes you think if R.L. Stine has been to Disney World going on the Haunted Mansion ride, or may have read about haunted Disney stories. To wrap this video up, some episodes were also inspired from like 1950s sci-fi horror B-movie titles, like It Came From Beneath the Sink and Came From Beneath the Sea. There's probably other ones I'm forgetting, but that will be all for today. Hope you liked the video and enjoyed the analyze and comparing Goosebumps to classic horror movies. Before I wrap up this video, I want to give a little disclaimer here in case you're wondering, where did I find and research this topic? I didn't. It was me using my voice, rewatching some episodes, critical thinking, using logic, and being analytical, comparing Goosebumps to classic horror movies. Hope you got something out of this video, thinking a little logic on where R.L. Stine got his inspiration for Goosebumps episodes and the stories that he wrote in books. Also, another way of looking at this, he was paying tribute to horror movies he grew up watching when he was a little kid growing up. So that wraps up today's video. I will see you tomorrow for one more horror movie review to wrap up this year's October's horror movie reviews.